When word spread that Princess Alexandra, one of the last living links to Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother had privately handed over a set of royal jewels to Princess Catherine, the palace walls seemed to tighten with silence. There were no official statements, no denials, no confirmations, just an uneasy quiet that carried more weight than any royal proclamation ever could. These weren't just jewels, they were whispers of legacy, fragments of history, and proof of unspoken loyalties buried deep beneath royal protocol. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. For generations, these gems had remained locked away, sealed by the Queen Mother's command, waiting for the moment the rightful queen would wear them. But when Alexandra, known for her discretion and unwavering devotion to the crown, placed that velvet box into Catherine's hands, every rule of royal inheritance shattered. The exchange was said to have taken place in the deep hush of night, away from the cameras and the corridors of authority. At Clarence House, the air was thick with something unspeakable, a mix of reverence, betrayal, and destiny. Alexandra, whose life had been a tapestry of loyalty and loss, was not a woman prone to impulsive acts. If she had chosen to pass on those jewels, it was not out of sentiment. It was for a purpose, the kind of purpose that can only come from a promise made long ago. Those who caught wind of the meeting described it as almost ceremonial, brief, quiet, but thunderous in meaning. The jewels, she reportedly told Catherine, were from the Queen Mother's heart. And those few words ignited a storm the monarchy was not prepared to face. What made this act so earth-shattering wasn't just the jewels themselves, it was who had been left out. Queen Camilla, the reigning consort, had been deliberately bypassed. No explanation, no mention. Just a symbolic exclusion that screamed louder than any official order. Within hours, whispers spread across Windsor and Buckingham. Senior courtiers exchanged glances heavy with understanding they knew what this meant. It wasn't just an inheritance, it was a declaration. A silent but undeniable statement about who the Queen Mother truly believed carried her legacy. Alexandra's decision was, in every sense, a royal rebellion wrapped in velvet and gold. Those close to Catherine said she was visibly moved, overwhelmed by the gesture, yet wary of its implications. She knew what it meant to receive something so sacred, especially when it came wrapped in secrecy. The Queen Mother's jewels were more than adornments. They symbolized unity, grace, and quiet defiance, the same qualities Catherine had embodied through years of scrutiny and scandal. But in the same breath, the act cast a shadow across the monarchy. Because behind this supposed blessing was the ghost of a choice to trust one woman and exclude another. It was a message so personal, so deliberate, that even the king himself seemed unsure how to respond. Within days, the palace buzzed with unease. Courtiers debated in hushed tones whether this transfer violated royal protocol. Some saw it as Alexandra's act of conscience fulfilling a dying wish of her beloved aunt, the Queen Mother. Others viewed it as a direct challenge to the king's authority, a breach of hierarchy that could destabilize the fragile balance within the family. Rumors soon emerged that the Queen Mother had left a secret clause in her will, one that named Catherine as the intended keeper of certain personal items that were never meant to be catalogued under royal assets. If true, it meant Alexandra wasn't acting alone. She was executing a plan set in motion decades earlier, designed to protect the crown's integrity from what the Queen Mother once called the erosion of dignity. And yet, even amid the whispers, one truth stood out above all: others. This was no random act of kindness. It was a calculated gesture from a generation that had seen too much and trusted too little. Alexandra had chosen her moment carefully, aware that the monarchy was teetering between tradition and transformation. By placing those jewels into Catherine's hands, she wasn't just honouring an old promise, she was declaring a new order, one rooted in the Queen Mother's quiet defiance and her belief that grace, not ambition, should define royalty. But the question lingered like an echo in the halls of Windsor. Why now? Why would Alexandra, after decades of silence, choose this moment to act? Perhaps because she saw what others refused to see, that history was beginning to repeat itself. The same divisions, the same fractures, The same hunger for validation that once haunted the royal line were resurfacing. And perhaps she knew that the only way to preserve the soul of the crown was to place it in the hands of the one woman who still carried its purity untouched. As the story spread beyond palace walls, the world could only speculate. Some called it a betrayal. Others, a miracle of timing. But those closest to the truth understood that this act, this secret handover, was not the beginning of a feud. It was the culmination of a prophecy whispered long before Catherine ever entered royal life. And so, beneath the grandeur of tradition and the weight of secrecy, a hidden chapter of royal history was written, one that would soon force the monarchy to confront the question it had avoided for decades. Who did the Queen Mother truly intend to inherit her legacy? But the real story didn't begin with that velvet box. It began decades earlier when the Queen Mother herself foresaw a fracture that would one day threaten the crown and quietly took steps to protect her legacy from the woman she never trusted. Few could imagine the Queen Mother, in her twilight years, quietly rewriting her will with secret intentions. But palace insiders claim she knew rivalry, ambition, and modern betrayal would one day tear the monarchy apart. Her jewels weren't just ornaments, they were symbols of lineage and warnings of who could and couldn't be trusted with the crown's soul. Those who served her closely described her as both sentimental and strategic, a woman who understood that power within the royal family wasn't simply about titles or crowns, but about moral strength. In her private chambers, she is said to have whispered her deepest concerns about the future, about the woman who would one day follow Diana, and about the possibility that the monarchy's dignity could be lost in the shadows of personal ambition. For years, the Queen Mother watched the world change around her. The monarchy she once knew, built on restraint, grace, and quiet power, was shifting into something far more unpredictable. Behind her gentle smile lay a mind constantly at work, anticipating storms that others dismissed. She had seen how scandal, deceit, and hunger for relevance could undo even the most powerful dynasty. And so, in her final years, she began drafting what would become one of the most secretive and controversial annexes to a royal will, a document that, to this day, remains sealed by royal decree. Those who've heard whispers of its content claim it contained more than instructions about jewels. It was a map of who could safeguard the monarchy's heart. Among the few entrusted with her confidence was Princess Alexandra, her beloved niece, and one of the rare royals who shared her temperament, reserved, thoughtful, and utterly loyal. To Alexandra, the Queen Mother revealed what others could not know. There was talk of protecting the legacy from pretenders, a chilling phrase found scribbled in the margins of her diary. That diary, reportedly written in her unmistakable cursive, hinted at fears that the line between duty and desire would one day blur. She saw, with eerie clarity, that the woman who came after, Diana, might fracture what little unity remained. In private, she spoke of Catherine as a child of grace, long before the young woman ever crossed the threshold of royal life, as if destiny itself had whispered her name. When the Queen Mother passed, many believed her estate had been divided in simple form, some heirlooms to the crown, others to her descendants. But few knew of the jewel casket she handed to Alexandra in her final days. It was said to be personal, not official, and it contained the very symbols of the Queen Mother's silent rebellion, brooches, pearls, and tiaras she kept apart from the royal inventory. They weren't meant to shine under ceremony, but to serve as guardians of an unspoken truth. The Queen Mother's will reportedly stated that these jewels should remain untouched until the right woman appeared, one who carried the same spirit of quiet devotion she had admired in her own daughter and granddaughter. What made this gesture even more striking was its deliberate exclusion of Camilla. Palace whispers long suggested that Camilla, despite her eventual title, was never intended to inherit any personal jewelry from the Queen Mother. She was to receive only state-regulated pieces, those without sentiment or history, cold artifacts, not heirlooms of love. To the Queen Mother, personal jewelry represented moral lineage, not just bloodline. And if certain reports are to be believed, she viewed moral worth as the truest inheritance of all. Her foresight bordered on prophecy. Within those locked vaults and private words, She had built a system of protection, ensuring that her treasures, and the meaning behind them, would find their way to the one who embodied the old virtues of the crown. And when the time came, Alexandra honored that trust without hesitation. She became the hand that bridged generations, the executor of a secret pact between the past and the present. As the jewels passed from Alexandra's trembling hands to Catherine's, that unspoken royal prophecy seemed to be unfolding, one that would soon ignite a storm no one could contain. It was supposed to be a quiet evening at Clarence's house, but beneath the flickering chandeliers, a scene unfolded that insiders now describe as the most symbolic act of rebellion in years. Alexandra arrived unannounced, carrying a velvet box sealed with the Queen Mother's initials. Catherine, unaware of what was inside, stood speechless as Alexandra whispered, "It's time." No courtiers, no attendants, no press. Just two women standing at the crossroads of royal destiny, one passing the torch, the other silently accepting the weight of it. The air in that room, they say, carried more power than any official ceremony ever could, because that night wasn't about jewels, it was about legacy, not gold, but grace. Inside the box lay history itself. Nestled in velvet was the brooch worn by the Queen Mother at Elizabeth's coronation, the same brooch she had called her guardian of the throne. It had been missing from public display for decades, rumoured to be locked deep within royal vaults. Yet, here it was, resting in Catherine's trembling hands. When Alexandra looked at her, she reportedly said words that would echo through the corridors of Windsor for years to come. "These belong to you by blood, by grace, not by title." That statement alone broke centuries of unspoken rule, cutting through the delicate hierarchy that defined royal inheritance. It wasn't about position anymore. It was worth it. Those who have pieced together what happened that evening say Catherine was overcome with emotion. She didn't speak, but her silence spoke volumes. Her eyes, witnesses say, reflected a blend of disbelief and understanding, the realization that she was being chosen for something far greater than herself. Alexandra, though frail, carried herself with an unshakable resolve, her words deliberate and heavy with meaning. She wasn't giving Catherine a piece of jewellery. She was handing her the Queen Mother's unbroken trust, the emblem of the crown's moral centre. Every clasp, every gem, every intricate engraving in that brooch held stories of resilience, heartbreak, and faith virtues that Catherine now represented in the modern age. Yet, as the night unfolded, the act's secrecy took on a sharper tone. Palace guards later confirmed Alexandra's visit, but were immediately ordered to erase all records from the entry logs. It was as if the palace itself was trying to swallow the truth before it reached daylight. And in that concealment lay the first sign that something much larger was at play. Why hide something so symbolic unless it threatens the very order of things? It wasn't merely a sentimental exchange, it was strategic. Alexandra knew exactly what she was doing. By bypassing the formal process, she ensured no one, not even the king, could intervene. When word of the transfer reached a few within the inner circle, panic set in. Camilla's aides, loyal and fiercely protective, were livid. They viewed it as a direct act of defiance against her position as queen consort. Their fury wasn't only about the jewels, but about what they represented. The fact that Alexandra had kept the meeting secret from the king only deepened the insult. It was as if she was declaring that Catherine, not Camilla, was the rightful keeper of the Queen Mother's moral legacy. The balance of royal power had quietly shifted that night, though no one outside those walls could yet see it. Catherine's acceptance of the jewels was not just an act of gratitude, but of understanding. She knew what it meant to hold something so sacred, something that carried not just history, but prophecy. Her calmness, her quiet nod, and the way she clutched that velvet box all pointed to a deeper realization that from this moment onward, her life would no longer be her own. She had become the vessel of a legacy too powerful to ignore. But even as Catherine held the jewels in her hands, whispers began spreading through royal corridors, whispers that would soon reach Queen Camilla herself. When Camilla found out, the fury was instant. Witnesses say she locked herself in her study for hours, refusing to speak to anyone, not even the king. To her, this wasn't just about jewels. It was about power, legitimacy, and humiliation. The crown she fought to wear suddenly felt hollow, as if the Queen Mother had cursed her from beyond the grave. She had endured decades of criticism, scandal, and scrutiny to finally stand beside the king, only to discover that even in her reign, ghosts from the past were questioning her right to rule. To Camilla, the secret exchange between Alexandra and Catherine was not an act of sentiment, it was an ambush, and the silence from those around her made it worse. Every minute of secrecy felt like another betrayal, another reminder that she would never truly belong in the house she now presided over. Her closest confidants reported her voice breaking through the thick palace doors, sharp and furious. How dare they decide my worth? It wasn't only rage, it was the sound of an old wound reopening. Camilla had spent years convincing the world and herself that she had finally earned her place in history. Now, that illusion was crumbling. To think that the Queen Mother, revered by millions and adored by the late Queen Elizabeth, had left her entirely out of something so deeply personal was more than she could bear. The jewels represented everything Camilla had never been given: trust, acceptance, and moral authority. In that single act of exclusion, she felt stripped of the invisible crown she had fought hardest for: the people's respect. The king found himself trapped in an impossible position. Behind closed doors, he tried to calm his wife, urging her to see the situation as a misunderstanding, but even he could not ignore what the gesture symbolized. To the world, it was a private transfer of heirlooms. To the palace, it was a declaration that the Queen Mother's loyalty had bypassed Camilla entirely. Charles was torn between his love for his wife and his loyalty to his mother's unspoken wishes. Every word he uttered seemed to deepen the wound. When he finally said, "They were your mother's jewels, not mine," the tension between husband and wife became unbearable. For the king, it was a reminder of duty. For Camilla, it was the ultimate betrayal. Senior courtiers warned that attempting to reclaim the jewels could spark a constitutional scandal. They advised discretion, insisting that any confrontation would only fan the flames of public speculation. But discretion was the last thing on Camilla's mind. To her, silence meant surrender. Yet, just as her anger threatened to explode into the open, Prince William intervened. Those close to the situation said his tone was calm but resolute when he confronted his father privately. "Some things," he said, "were never yours to give." It was a moment of reckoning that left the king speechless. William wasn't challenging authority, he was defending legacy, and that defense carried the weight of both his mother and his grandmother's memory. The weeks that followed were some of the most strained in recent royal history. Staff noticed the sudden chill between the royal households. Meetings were shorter, conversations clipped, invitations declined. Catherine withdrew into quiet dignity, while Camilla's absence from several official events became impossible to ignore. Those who once surrounded her began to drift away, uncertain which side to stand on. The monarchy had survived affairs, abdications, and divorces, but this was different. This was an invisible war over meaning, tradition, and inheritance. And unlike scandals of the past, this one carried no public statement, no headlines, just silence, the kind that eats away at power from within. Camilla's isolation deepened, she began, spending long stretches of time alone, her confidence eroding with each passing day. The glitter of her crown no longer offered comfort, it mocked her. For the first time since her coronation, she began to wonder if the Queen Mother's legacy had been waiting, quietly, for a moment like this to reveal where true royalty still lived. Yet behind Camilla's outrage lay something deeper, a fear that the jewels carried not just royal weight, but a hidden message meant to dethrone her influence entirely. When Catherine opened the box, she found not just jewels but a folded piece of parchment sealed in wax. Insiders claim the message was written in the Queen Mother's own delicate handwriting, addressed simply, "To the future Queen, who wears grace, not pride." That single line changed everything. The jewels weren't an inheritance, they were an endorsement that bypassed Camilla entirely. For Catherine, this discovery was a blessing and a burden. What she held in her hands wasn't merely the weight of diamonds and gold, but the spirit of a woman who had quietly shaped the moral compass of an entire generation of monarchs. And that spirit, even decades after her passing, was speaking again. The note was said to be brief, but its words cut deeper than any decree. It spoke of virtue over vanity, a phrase many later interpreted as a direct contrast between Catherine's quiet integrity and Camilla's more complicated reputation. The Queen Mother's tone, firm yet tender, carried the conviction of a woman who had spent her life defending the purity of the crown's image. To serve the crown, the note reportedly read, is to surrender oneself to grace, not ambition. It wasn't simply advice, it was a warning, one that echoed through the generations and landed squarely in the hands of a woman who had, unknowingly, been chosen long before she ever wore a royal title. Alexandra later confirmed the message was genuine. She revealed that the note had been taken directly from the Queen Mother's sealed diary, entrusted to her as a matter of sacred confidence. For years, Alexandra had guarded that page, waiting for the moment she believed the Queen Mother had foreseen the moment when the monarchy would be in need of renewal, when dignity would once again need defending. And when that moment came, she knew exactly where to turn. Catherine, in Alexandra's eyes, was not just a daughter-in-law to the crown. She was the embodiment of everything the Queen Mother had prayed the royal family would one day become again: principled, kind, and untouchable by scandal. Those who witnessed Catherine reading the note describe a transformation. Her composure faltered, tears welling in her eyes, as the enormity of what she had received sank in. It wasn't just jewelry or a letter, it was a mandate. A call to uphold the values of a dynasty that had nearly lost its moral footing. For years, Catherine had endured silent trials, whispers of rivalry, pressures of perfection, the unbearable weight of public expectation, and yet she had never retaliated. Now, it seemed, the Queen Mother's message was acknowledging her endurance, as if rewarding her restraint with divine validation. The emotional connection between the two women, though separated by time, became almost spiritual. Those close to Catherine said she felt as if she'd been seen not by the living, but by history itself. The Queen Mother had written of grace that outlives beauty, and those words resonated with Catherine's journey, her quiet battle to balance humanity with duty. It was as if the Queen Mother had left her not just a message, but a mirror, reflecting the kind of queen the monarchy desperately needed. When news of the note's existence began to circulate within royal circles, it reignited a long-dormant conversation that questioned the very essence of what it means to be royal. Was the crown meant to rest on the head of the powerful or the pure? Was a lineage enough? Or did the spirit of the person wearing it matter more? For some, the answer was clear. The Queen Mother's blessing had chosen Catherine as the rightful heir to her moral throne, a woman whose strength came not from authority, but from authenticity. But if the Queen Mother's message was meant to bless Catherine, it also reignited an old royal rivalry, one that Alexandra herself had tried to bury for decades. In an emotional confession to a trusted royal aide, Princess Alexandra reportedly admitted that she had been waiting for the right moment, the moment when the monarchy's survival would depend on the right woman wearing the Queen Mother's jewels. Her decision to hand them to Catherine was not spontaneous. It was her last promise fulfilled. For years, Alexandra had carried the secret in silence, guarding it through shifting reigns and royal reshuffles, never daring to reveal what the Queen Mother had whispered to her in their final private meeting. Now, decades later, that promise had found its purpose. To Alexandra, Catherine was not just a duchess or a future queen. She was the living embodiment of the virtues the Queen Mother once believed would keep the crown sacred. The confession, relayed quietly and without ceremony, revealed a truth too powerful for official record. Alexandra's diary, written in delicate script and kept locked away for years, reportedly contained her own notes on the Queen Mother's final wish. Within its pages were reminders and moral reflections, written in moments of reflection and fear as the monarchy faced scandals that threatened its dignity. One entry read, "The jewels must never adorn those who trade grace for gain." Another described, "A queen of silent strength," language that mirrored how Alexandra often spoke of Catherine in private. The diaries weren't just records, They were blueprints of intention, quietly passed down through blood and belief. In her confession, Alexandra made one point abundantly clear: Camilla was never part of the Queen Mother's spiritual circle. Though polite in public, the Queen Mother had viewed her through the lens of caution, fearing what she once described as a woman too familiar with controversy, too close to chaos. Alexandra, who had been present during many of those conversations, remembered the Queen Mother's tone, not angry, but certain. The crown must never lose its innocence, she had said. And so, when Camilla eventually rose to her position beside the king, Alexandra had already made peace with her own silent rebellion. She would wait, and when the time came, she would fulfill the promise left in her care. She confessed that her hesitation had not come from doubt, but from fear. Fear of public backlash if the handover became known. Fear of the headlines that would follow. Fear that the royal institution, already fragile, could not withstand another internal fracture. She understood that her loyalty to Catherine would not be universally praised, not in a family where power was often measured in silence. But Alexandra's conviction ran deeper than politics. For her, this was about restoring the monarchy's soul. She had watched Catherine for decades, observed how she endured endless scrutiny, how she carried herself through humiliation and heartache without bitterness. Dignity in silence, Alexandra once told a confidant, is rarer than diamonds. And in Catherine, she saw that same rare light the Queen Mother once carried. Her act was not one of defiance, but of restoration. She believed the monarchy had drifted too far from its roots, entangled in image, distracted by influence, and losing the quiet grace that once defined its authority. This was never about crowns or titles, she told her aide. It was about conscience. Handing over those jewels wasn't an act of rebellion against Camilla or the king. It was an act of remembrance. Alexandra saw herself as a guardian of the Queen Mother's legacy, not an enemy of the present. She described the jewels not as ornaments of beauty, but as a living reminder of what the crown must never become again: proud, divided, and hollow. It was a confession tinged with sadness but driven by conviction. Alexandra knew her decision would change how history remembered her. Yet she also knew that silence would have been a greater betrayal. Her final words, written in a note to her aide, were both haunting and resolute. The Queen Mother believed that Grace would return to the throne one day. I only kept her faith alive long enough to see it happen. But as Alexandra's confession began circulating in private circles, the story reached someone who had been watching from the shadows, King Charles himself. When the king finally learned the full truth, those close to him said he became pale. He didn't shout. He didn't command. He simply sat in silence, staring at the portraits of his mother and grandmother, two women whose approval he spent a lifetime chasing. The realization that even in death, their favor bypassed his wife was devastating. For Charles, it wasn't just jewelry. It was about legacy, validation, and the painful echo of generational judgment. The very women who had defined his sense of duty, who had shaped his moral compass and expectations, had once again drawn a line that excluded the woman he loved most. That silent exclusion struck deeper than any criticism from the outside world ever could. At that moment, he reportedly turned to his private secretary and uttered the words that captured his despair. "This changes everything." The phrase was simple, but its meaning was layered. It spoke not just to his understanding of the situation, but to the collision of loyalty, love, and the monarchy's fragile equilibrium. Charles knew immediately that any attempt to reclaim the jewels would backfire. To interfere with something tied so closely to the Queen Mother's intentions would not only provoke outrage within the family, but also risk alienating the public. In the people's eyes, Catherine was the embodiment of grace, the woman the Queen Mother herself had apparently chosen to continue her spiritual legacy. And no amount of royal authority could erase that perception. His advisors, ever cautious, urged him to tread carefully. "Majesty," one warned, "the optics would be disastrous." They knew the monarchy's survival depended on symbolism as much as tradition. To the public, Catherine represented continuity as a bridge between the past and the future, between the moral discipline of the old monarchy and the emotional transparency of the new. To challenge her now would be to invite a moral war the crown could not win. Even the most loyal courtiers admitted privately that the Queen Mother's supposed blessing had cemented Catherine's place in history in a way no ceremony ever could. Charles understood this, yet the emotional toll was immense. He had spent years fighting to prove that love and duty could coexist, that his marriage to Camilla was not a betrayal of the crown but an evolution of it. Now, it felt as if all that effort had been undone in a single revelation. Every time he looked at Camilla, he saw the reflection of his mother's disapproval, not in words, but in legacy. The Queen Mother's message had spoken from beyond the grave, and it left him powerless. Behind closed doors, Charles chose restraint. He told his advisors there would be no statement, no confrontation, no attempt to retrieve the jewels. "Let it rest," he said quietly. But those words carried more sorrow than surrender. Insiders noticed the change almost immediately. The king, usually attentive and warm with his wife in public, began to withdraw. Engagements were conducted with polite distance. Their private dinners grew shorter, their silences longer. Friends close to the couple described a man haunted by his lineage, torn between the wife who stood by him through scandal and the ancestors who seemed to have denied her even from the grave. His faith in the monarchy's moral unity began to falter. The ghosts of his family, the ones he had spent a lifetime trying to live up to now, seemed to stand between him and his marriage. Still, Charles understood the weight of restraint. He knew that to act in anger would only confirm what many already whispered, that the Queen Mother had seen something he could not. So, he chose silence, a silence that carried both dignity and defeat. In that silence, the monarchy endured, but at a cost only the king himself could measure. The palace moved on, the world speculated, and yet one truth lingered behind the gilded doors, a truth Charles could neither deny nor undo. The Queen Mother's blessing had not been for his reign, but for the woman who would follow. But while the king wrestled with ghosts of the past, Catherine quietly prepared to do something that would solidify her place in royal history forever. Weeks later, Catherine appeared at a small, untelevised charity event, wearing one of the Queen Mother's brooches. It wasn't a fashion statement, it was a declaration. Without saying a word, she honoured the late Queen Mother, Princess Alexandra, and every silent woman who had shaped the crown's grace. The public saw it as a rebirth of royal dignity and a quiet rejection of Camilla's reign. What should have been a routine event for children's welfare became an unforgettable moment in royal history. Those few minutes, captured by an amateur photographer and shared online, rippled across the world with a force the palace could neither predict nor control. Catherine had said nothing, yet her silence spoke louder than any royal address ever could. The image spread like wildfire. Within hours, millions noticed the brooch, a piece unseen in public for decades, instantly recognized as the Queen Mother's cherished emblem of moral integrity. Commentators, historians, and royal watchers flooded the internet with interpretations. Some called it poetic justice, others saw it as destiny fulfilled. But regardless of opinion, one truth stood undeniable. Catherine had reclaimed the monarchy's lost narrative not through power, but through principle. She had transformed a family relic into a symbol of redemption. And for the first time in years, the royal institution looked united not by hierarchy, but by heart. By morning, headlines across the globe carried her image. "The return of grace," one newspaper declared. "A new queen rises," said another. The moment was electric, not because Catherine had sought attention, but because she had done the opposite. Her quiet defiance, wrapped in humility, reminded the world of what royalty was meant to represent: not opulence, not entitlement, but service, strength, and sincerity. Senior royals, bound by protocol, avoided public comment, but insiders whispered that everyone within the palace understood the gesture's true weight. The message was clear, one aide confided. The Queen Mother's legacy has found its rightful heir. The gesture did more than revive public affection. It restored faith. For years, the monarchy had been mired in whispers of scandal, distance, and internal rivalry. Yet in one act, Catherine brought back something Britain hadn't felt in generations: belief. Ordinary citizens, many of whom had long drifted from royal loyalty, suddenly saw the institution as human again. They saw the Queen Mother's moral compass living in Catherine's quiet grace. It was no longer about titles, crowns, or hierarchy. It was about decency, about the rare courage to uphold values in a world that often forgets them. Meanwhile, away from cameras, Alexandra watched from her residence. Those who visited her later described her smiling through tears, her heart heavy with both pride and relief. The promise she had carried for decades, the vow to protect the Queen, Mother's legacy, had finally been fulfilled. "She has done it," she reportedly murmured. "She's brought her back." Even the king, who had once battled his own ghosts of doubt and tradition, was said to have reacted with quiet grace. Witnesses claim that when shown the photograph of Catherine wearing the brooch, he paused, nodded slowly, and whispered, "So it begins again." That single nod said everything, an unspoken acknowledgement that the monarchy's soul had found its way home. The storm of secrecy, anger, and revelation had ended not with confrontation, but with renewal. Catherine had not fought for the crown. She had reminded the world why it still mattered. And in doing so, she had changed the course of royal history without ever raising her voice. But as the dust settled, one lingering question remained. What would become of the Queen Mother's other sealed treasures, and who would dare open them next? In the heart of Windsor, deep within the royal vault, lie boxes marked only with the initials Q.M., sealed since the Queen Mother's passing. If her final act was to anoint Catherine as the true heir of grace, what other secrets might those boxes hold? Some say the jewels were just the beginning of a coded message from the past, shaping the monarchy's destiny. Generations of archivists and historians have spoken in hushed tones about what else might rest inside those unsealed compartments. Some believe the Queen Mother left behind more letters, hidden instructions, or perhaps private reflections that reveal how she intended the monarchy to evolve beyond her lifetime. And though decades have passed, no one has dared to open them without royal consent. The vault remains guarded not only by stone and steel, but by silence, a silence that has preserved her final words as both mystery and warning. Alexandra's act has now awakened new life in that silence. Her courage in honouring the Queen Mother's private will has not only shifted the monarchy's moral balance but sparked speculation of a deeper design, a hidden succession prophecy that reaches far beyond jewels. Royal watchers whisper that the Queen Mother had always sensed the fragility of future reigns. She knew the time would come when the crown would need to be guided not by lineage alone, but by integrity. By passing her private treasures through Alexandra to Catherine, she may have set in motion a test one that would measure the monarchy's strength not in titles, but in truth. Her foresight now feels prophetic, as if every choice she made, every secret she left behind, was leading to this quiet revolution within the royal bloodline. For Catherine, the moment of accepting those jewels was not just symbolic, it was transformative. In doing so, she closed one chapter and opened another, ending the era of dominance built on power and pride, and ushering in a new one rooted in compassion and restraint. To the public, it looked like grace winning over grandeur. To those inside the palace, it felt like a recalibration of destiny itself. Catherine had become more than a princess, more than a consort in waiting. She had become a moral compass, the kind the Queen Mother once embodied when the world needed stability and soul. It was as if the spirit of the Queen Mother, watchful and wise, had chosen Catherine not through bloodline, but through the purity of her heart. Meanwhile, Camilla's influence began to quietly fade into the background. The days of dominance and defiance gave way to quiet withdrawal. Her public appearances grew softer, her words more careful, her smile less certain. It was not exile, but acceptance and acknowledgement that the monarchy's future no longer revolved around her. Silence, once her weapon, had now become her defense. Even the king, wearied by the burdens of loyalty and legacy, seemed to recognize that the crown's true stability no longer rested with him alone. It was Catherine who had become the heart of a process. Family divided by time, but healed by humility. And so, the monarchy stands forever changed, divided in its loyalties, yet renewed in its purpose. What began as a secret act of faith between two women has evolved into the quiet reawakening of a centuries-old institution. The Queen Mother's legacy, once thought buried with her, now pulses through Catherine's every act of grace. The jewels, once locked away, have become emblems of unity and endurance, reminders that even in the coldest corridors of power, conscience still reigns supreme. But the story doesn't end here, because for all that has been revealed, far more remains hidden. Those sealed boxes in the vault still hold their silence, their mysteries unbroken. What lies inside could reshape not only royal memory, but royal destiny itself. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.